So, with the release of Echoes of Wisdom imminent, I just have one question from all of these trailers. Just what is going on with Echoes of Wisdom's Hyrule? Now, specifically, I mean in relation to the already convoluted Zelda timeline that was originally introduced in Hyrule Historia. It is specifically confusing me because of two very conflicting details, because on the surface, it seems pretty straightforward. This is evident in my first point. The map and art style are very, very convincingly like A Link to the Past and Link's Awakening remakes respectively. But point 2, the Traversing Hyrule trailer released by Nintendo completely throws out every timeline theory I had from point 1. What I mean is that when the initial launch trailer was shown and announced, I thought it was very cut and dry. This takes place in the Fallen Timeline, which, I'm not going to get into all of the details of the different parts of the Zelda timeline in this video. Maybe I'll make one in the future, but for now, I highly recommend watching Zeltic's video on the timeline. Link is in the description, if you're uncertain about anything I discuss here. Anyways, back on track. I initially thought that this takes place in the Fallen Timeline. I thought this was fairly obvious due to the general map layout shown in the launch trailer. Hyrule Castle is in the center, Death Mountain's above, and even the dungeon shown seems like the exact same one shown in A Link to the Past and A Link Between Worlds. Sure, there were some things off, Death Mountain was a little off, but I didn't think much of it. Then the Traversing Hyrule trailer released and blew everything I thought I knew away. See Zoras, Gerudo, Gorons, freaking Deku Scrubs? Okay, first of all, side note, I'm super excited for Deku Scrubs, especially the royalty, but secondly, what? And if you don't know the significance of this, none of these races exist within A Link to the Past, and by extension, the entirety of the Fallen Timeline. And I do mean none, to my knowledge. This detail made me think more on this and realize something. It isn't that I was wrong that this is no longer within the Fallen Timeline, it's that this game marks the beginning of the Fallen Timeline. This is the third sequel to Ocarina of Time that we were missing. Now, hold on. What do I mean by third sequel? Well, see, in the ending of Ocarina of Time, time splits, allowing for 3 different timelines. The one where Link is defeated, the one where Link goes back in time as a child, and the one Link leaves behind from when he became an adult. The child timeline leads to Majora's Mask, a direct sequel to Ocarina of Time. The adult timeline leads to Wind Waker, another sequel to Ocarina of Time, as evident by the intro story. And finally, the Fallen Timeline's earliest game used to be A Link to the Past, which previously was a huge jump in time. But with the introduction of Echoes of Wisdom, this jump doesn't seem nearly as great. I say this because there is just no way that the Hyrule in this game isn't the Hyrule from Ocarina of Time, just slightly augmented. Here are the details why. 1. As previously stated, all of the races I mentioned, Zora, Gerudo, Goron, Deku Scrub, don't exist in the Fallen Timeline. But they do exist in Ocarina of Time. Secondly, all of the locations seem to be in the right locations in reference to one another, and any discrepancies can be made up for with details from A Link to the Past. For instance, Death Mountain being above Kakariko, which is not the case in A Link to the Past. Third, the Great Deku Tree is present in this game and bears a striking similarity to the Deku Tree from Ocarina of Time. Plus, there's also just no Deku Tree in the Fallen Timeline. Fourth, and finally, Zelda's appearance is uncannily similar to her appearance in Ocarina of Time, from the hair to the head ornament to, most obviously, the dress. Overall, I think all of the signs point to this being our final sequel to Ocarina of Time, albeit taking place a fair amount, but not too far, in the future of the Fallen Timeline. Or is it? See, yet another thing keeps tickling in the back of my head. Why do the Zoras look like this, and not like this? If they truly exist directly after Ocarina of Time in any sort of capacity, why do they look more like the Zoras found in Breath of the Wild? So then I got to thinking, maybe just maybe, this isn't at the beginning of the Fallen Timeline, but at the end. See, if it's closer to Breath of the Wild, it would explain the presence of Breath of the Wild Zoras. Plus, River Zoras are present in The Legend of Zelda and Adventures of Link, the last games in this timeline. But another race causes a problem. Deku Scrubs are nowhere to be found in either of these two games, nor within Breath of the Wild. So there's just no way for Deku Scrubs to suddenly appear between the two games. I was honestly stumped and thought maybe I'm just overthinking it and it was just a design choice, that I just shouldn't think too much about it. But I was determined, and in re-looking over my notes, I realized that I was wrong the whole time. The Zoras on Ocarina of Time are obviously not Sea Zoras. They are River Zora. They literally live in a domain at the end of Zora's river. I was being dumb this whole time. That explains their more fish-like appearance. In later games in the timeline, they evolve into these new River Zoras found in A Link to the Past and games after. And this brings me back to the original theory, and I think further proves the point that this is the connecting game between Ocarina of Time and A Link to the Past, and the omission of Sea Zoras can be explained by the fact that they didn't come from the sea yet. The designs of the River Zoras found in A Link to the Past makes all of this make so much sense. Now, there does actually exist evidence I found for another theory, one that I touched upon very briefly before saying that it couldn't be true. What if this isn't in the Fallen Timeline at all? What if this takes place after Four Swords Adventures in the Child Timeline? Now, I know what you're thinking. What? That doesn't make any sense. But doesn't it? See, Four Swords Adventures has the same King Ganon found in the Fallen Timeline, has the same races and designs that I described previously, although the Garuda aren't present in this game, they are described, so we know that they exist here. Oh, and what's this? The map of Hyrule in this game is very similar. Death Mountain to the left of Hyrule Castle, there's another mountain to the right of Death Mountain, a plains to the right and south of Hyrule Castle, and furthermore, doesn't Zelda's design also look very familiar here? Well, the non-existence of Deku Scrubs still kind of throws a wrench in this theory, but I still rest my case. Finally, though, a third theory with evidence is that this actually takes place before Four Swords Adventure and after Twilight Princess in the Child Timeline. All of the Ocarina of Time evidence can apply for Twilight Princess too, since the game takes place only a few generations after the events of Ocarina of Time, and the events of Four Swords Adventures makes up for any details missing in Twilight Princess that Echoes of Wisdom has. This theory holds potentially more ground than this game even being at the end of this timeline, because its placement here explains the existence of the Deku Scrub Kingdom. Deku Scrubs exist in Majora's Mask, the direct sequel to Ocarina of Time, and as we know from that game, everything in Termina has a parallel existence in Hyrule. So, it explains the existence of the Deku Scrub royalty we see in the Echoes of Wisdom Traversing Hyrule trailer. This game, most likely, however, can't exist between Majora's Mask and Twilight Princess since we know just how close they are in relative time to one another. But the placement here actually makes a lot of sense due to how close together in time Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, and Twilight Princess are, and how far away in time Four Swords Adventures is from the other three. The only hiccup in this theory is that the Sea Zoras aren't present in Twilight Princess or Four Swords Adventures, but I think that this can be explained away better than the Deku Scrubs. Like I said previously, they're Sea Zora. They could have just gone back to the sea and only appeared for this game, you know? Basically, to wrap up this video, I think that there are 3 places in the timeline this could potentially be. Either after Ocarina of Time and before A Link to the Past, the more obvious answer in my opinion, or after Four Swords Adventure and before Breath of the Wild, either right before or right after the timelines converge, or right after Twilight Princess and before Four Swords Adventures. I think the first is actually the more correct one than the latter two, despite it being the obvious answer that everyone's going with. But hey, wouldn't it be really cool if one of the latter ones was true? And personally, I'm a big fan of the after Twilight Princess location. Regardless, I'm super excited for this game, and I can't wait to get my hands on it. Personally, I think that the Zelda Timeline is a fun thing to speculate, but at the end of the day, it doesn't really matter, and I think too many people get way too serious about it. Just enjoy the game and its references. Speculate on continuity if you want, but don't put people down for having different opinions on timeline placement in a video game series. That's just silly. But if you like this video, please consider subscribing. I'm sure I'll be making more Zelda content in the future, including more fun theories. And please comment, I love to talk to each and every one of you. But I'll see you next time, whenever next time is.